Beardy and the Beast Media Club.
Ba-da-ba, ba-da-ba. This is a placeholder intro song.
Welcome to the Beardy and the Beast Media Club, where spoilers are welcome. We'll manifest those spoilers like an otherworldly evil would confront you with your greatest traumas. We're available here and on other services with a complete list located at beardyandthebeast.com. My name is Drew, and joining us from a hellscape dimension is Devin. We will be discussing the 1997 sci-fi horror classic Event Horizon. Hey, Devin,
Yeah.
would you like to know why we make such a good team?
Why do we make such a good team?
Because where we're going, there is no eyes in team. So I suppose the real question is, did this film stand the test of time like the Event Horizon did Hell?
So I remember watching this movie when it came out. So I was like about as tall as you were when we were talking about Silent Hill, I think.
Okay, yeah.
And I remembered it being better,
Okay. Okay. I get I get
but
I get I get what you mean. I definitely felt that as well. And I'm sure we'll discuss that. This this film for me has always reigned as one of those movies that is bad
yeah,
but awesome,
yeah,
and that badness is part of the flavor. It's that
mhm,
little bitter note in something sweet.
yeah,
There's a bunch of points where I think that it probably missed the mark and didn't quite get where it was trying to go.
yeah,
But knowing the director and the production like constraints and that sort of things definitely helps explain some of this.
oh yeah.
But I mean, let's before we talk about the production,
Mhm.
it's probably best if we talk about the characters and their relation to the ship. And the reason why that second half is so important is because there isn't much to the characters themselves.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah, they're not really grandiose. They're definitely no real character development. This is definitely just your popcorn flick. It's just a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of horror, a little bit of action to hear what might be craving.
Yeah.
The So my favorite character of this film, the ship.
You know, I'm I'm of mixed feelings on the ship. I mean, living ships in sci-fi, I know for a fact there's some sci-fi that we both love
Oh, for
that
sure.
involve living ships. I'm looking at you, Farscape.
Mm-hmm.
This is I feel like the character of the ship, the idea was there. I don't think they developed it as well as they could have. And that's kind of my impression of the film overall.
Yeah, I agree,
Like
100%.
it's when I look at the characters, most of the characters are archetypal.
Mm-hmm.
You know what they are. I really appreciate how like you got an immediate feeling that the crew knew each other. They worked together and just the way they bantered right from the get-go. There was a couple of spots where I'm like, don't quite think you'd be at each other's throats this immediately.
Yeah.
And I think there's little things like the captain, Miller, just the immediate is like, nope, screw this, we're out. don't care what the mission was.
You you
Like
you
they
definitely got
built that well.
the family aspect of the crew as a
Mhm.
whole.
Yeah.
Each of the individual characters didn't feel well rounded. They definitely suited the archetype. Like you had the horny guy who was trying to always hook up. You had the smart ass guy who was always, quipping or bantering.
Yeah.
You had the nerd, or in this case, like a couple nerds.
Yeah.
Your medic, and then your strong-willed captain.
Yeah.
The They definitely could have expressed the character of the ship much better through Weir.
Mhm.
They they tried a bit. It definitely seemed like they were going for a the ship is alive and it's part of this component that's evil and it's talking through Weir, but they just couldn't grasp it. There was definitely something missing there.
Yeah, I felt like that. Like, so my immediate thoughts in the film again was they were going with the haunted house, eldritch horror, right?
Definitely.
Right. So there's that kind of mix. Like the idea that this was supposed to be a Lovecraftian cosmic horror wasn't lost on me. The development around it was. So you talk about them trying to push that through with Weir. That didn't leave an impact with me
Not at all.
because there was no reason for it to tie into Weir. Like, at least that was explained. Like, I can fan speculate, like, I can speculate a bunch of things, but, like, my immediate thoughts are like, "Okay, you've latched onto Weir, but why?" He he had nothing to do with this. It's not like he was there. If there's maybe a flash of when they were testing the drive and something happened then to make them tie in, I feel
I do have a theory about it,
alright.
but we can probably get into it in a little bit. It kind of develops as we talk about the characters. So if we
Mhm.
talk about Weir himself, he's a headstrong scientist, he was involved with the ship. He's amazed that it's come back. He's excited, but he's also had this like deep personal trauma that's occurred.
Yeah.
He discovered his wife who had committed suicide, I believe directly himself.
Yeah.
I mean that's
That's what was implied, I think.
yeah.
Anyway.
Then we go on to Peters, the doctor.
Mhm.
There again, there's not nothing much about any of these characters, in my opinion. You could write down their characters in 3 lines,
Yeah.
but she also had this appears to have some form of like personal trauma in relation to her son who's become
Yeah.
disabled. They could have probably elaborated on that. Like, was she the cause? Did she discover him? Why? And there's a reason why this is important to me. If we were to talk about the captain as well,
Mhm.
he definitely had that realized trauma. Like he has an entire sentence or like line in the film related to it.
Yeah.
He saw his crewmate engulfed in fire in zero G and watched him burn alive.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, these are also the characters that began to have hallucinations in relation to the ship activating.
Well, I think that's where I have some issues with this right off the bat
Yeah,
because Weir had the hallucinations or nightmares or whichever way you want to go with it before the ship activated. So it makes me go in questions like, why did it latch onto him? What was the point of that nightmare scene? Because it doesn't feel connected to everything else that's happened. It actually separated me from it. So when you talk about Peters and her kid and such, her having if she had turned into what Weir became, would have actually made more sense to me. It would have at least connected a little bit more to the eldritch horror
I see what you're
aspect of the
saying.
slowing going mad, right? Weir didn't have that. He was having this PTSD before any of this happened, so it felt out of place.
it could have definitely been solved with some type of ship construction thing where like or something that implied that it was his blood, sweat, and tears that went into building the ship. Like
Hmm.
he was involved in the construction, it was his ship, but so, something as simple as like a drop of his blood falling onto the engine when he pricked himself would have
Yeah.
been good enough for me. Because what they were implying, which again, it didn't suit me either, I agree
Hmm.
with you, is that the ship was calling out to those with trauma and using that to control or affect them.
Hmm.
And it only did those who had traumas that were expressed in the film.
Hmm.
The only exception to that would probably be Justin Baby Bear,
Yeah.
but he actually entered the Event Horizon engine.
Yeah.
So he wasn't actually being controlled. He was curious. He touched the thing. He got pulled in, and that was his trauma.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
why he was controllable. So Weir, as you stated, I couldn't place it, and I think you described it perfectly.
mm,
That there wasn't a reason for him to be the specific outlet.
yeah.
If they made him more headstrong, maybe I could see it better. If they described his production of the ship, even having said, I put my blood, sweat, and tears into the ship,
Yeah.
having some type of deep connection to it was not expressed.
Yeah. Yeah. And and honestly, like that's one of those things that kind of soured it. You said most of the other characters, there's something expressed there. And again, it's a horror film. I'm not looking for deep characterization when I'm watching a horror film.
I mean, continuity is still important, though.
Continuity is important, yes, right? But the simple characterization, I mean, isn't a problem. It's just the yeah. What's the logical consistency around this? We're out of all of them was the one who was least likely to me to turn, as it were, to be the ship's avatar.
Yeah, if they it could have been any of the numerous production difficulties that they had and editings and
Yeah,
things that cut out contextual scenes, things like that, but we really have to rate it as a whole as it is.
yeah,
It's clear why he was. It's not clear why he should have been. I guess is the conflict I'm having. I understand what they're going for and what they're trying to imply,
yeah.
but that lack of consistency really does not help solidify it.
I
Yeah.
actually think it hurts it. It hurts it even a lot more than just that. Okay, sure, the twist villain or whatever, but Weir's nightmares cheapens Stark's nightmares at the end. Because they're like, well, what does that mean? Does that like, or they both kind of cheapen each other? Because is she having these nightmares because of the proximity to the hell dimension, or which means again, why did Weir have them in the first place, or do them nightmares nothing? Which why did Weir have it in the first place? Like that bookend that was kind of there. Like,
Actually, to be honest, the one that makes the most sense to me was Stark,
yeah.
because her trauma was legitimately just weird.
Oh yeah, no, like
The so she that could have legitimately been just some form of like uh, PTSD triggering that happened, or alternatively, her being affected by the event horizon calling to her based
yeah,
on the trauma she experienced. It was easy, that ending.
yeah, yeah,
That little like last little minute scare was kind of like an easy one that they just threw out there.
yeah,
It The problem that it had is it didn't add to the film.
yeah. That, and I agree that her having the nightmare made perfect sense. It's the implications on the rest of the film that makes it go, okay, does that, like I said, does that mean that Weir did go into the hell dimension beforehand? Right. was good for her character. It was bad for the earlier introduction of it, right at the beginning of the film.
Oh, for sure, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's what I was meaning there more so.
No, and I mean, I agree with you. And it's funny that we talk about all these characters and how they're all seeming to be something missing, and I
Mm,
think that is because of the most important character, the ship.
mm,
There's just a whole lot about it that wasn't expressed appropriately that could have filled all these voids.
yeah, I agree. In
When the
it's
character development needed to be the ship the entire time.
yeah, it's eldritch horror is a bizarre genre anyway. I mean, the idea is you're not supposed to be able to comprehend what's happening, right? But there still needs to be something there. The ship as a character, in the way they presented it, was it felt passive. It felt like it was, there was an effect that was happening, but it didn't feel like the ship was influencing it.
Yet I'm
Y-
wondering if that has to do with like one of the original rewrites, because I think originally it was supposed to be evil aliens
Yeah.
that were turned into like, oh no, we'll make this like a hell dimension instead.
Mhm.
So if you had like actual evil aliens or like an actual antagonist in that manner, it probably would have made a whole lot more sense. But that being said, the movie itself is kind of firmly a piece of its time.
That's fair.
And that's it did not age nearly as well as I feel it should have. I understand why it's a cult classic,
Yeah.
but I mean I enjoyed watching it. I just
Mhm.
it didn't stand that test of time for me. So
Yeah.
24 years later, is it?
Yeah. Something
It
like that. Yeah.
I mean, there's not many movies that can stand that test. Two
No.
decades. I mean, surprisingly, Battlefield Earth actually got kind of better, but I'm saying 0 stars to half stars on that movie. Um,
it, it's funny because, two of the main characters are in movies that pretty much have stood that test of time. I
that's
mean,
true.
Sam Neill in Jurassic Park and Lawrence Fishburne in The Matrix, right? Like, and, and still similar enough era. Not like those movies were what, a total of 6, 7 years apart between all of them, I think.
Oh, for sure. The thing that I think also hurt this movie from a character aspect is it apparently like the characters were kind of tasked with making up their own backstory for their own characters, and that's
Yeah,
probably why some of those reactions didn't seem natural.
yeah,
Because if they're acting from a backstory that they've only developed themselves, especially when they're a crew that should have known each other for a long
yeah,
time, like what did they go through? I think one of
yeah. You need
the
to have a little bit more around that, right? Like,
I think one of
it's
the original takes was when the crew is introduced, they're actually saving a ship,
mhm,
and that's where the original airlock scene with Baby Bear was supposed to be.
right.
So they couldn't do that saving the person on that ship, so they just I mean it was a cool idea, so they kept it for later on with Baby Bear.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of a way to make the ship as a character work better.
I
Um, like,
I don't think you should
uh,
really stress it too much. Like
yeah,
it's something that would probably take far too much consideration because they ended up breaking that with Weir at the end too, because Weir ends up becoming a personification of the but
yeah,
that personification was supposed to be the ship, but then the orb opens and then it becomes Weir. There was a point that I thought was kind of cool, and it was probably the only time they actually expressed it well.
mhm,
Is there was a scene where the ship was talking through Weir,
mhm,
and that's when they were in the bridge of the ship,
yeah,
and the door was getting pounded on and like being hit. And Weir stands up and he starts moving towards the door and he's saying, "Open the door, open the door." And I don't. I think The way that it seemed to be expressed to me was less open the door to the bridge and more open the door to this evil that's trying to be expressed. And
Yeah.
that's the only scene that was convincing to me for the ship as a character and Weir's attachment to it. And then other
Yeah.
than that, it was disharmonious. I wouldn't say it missed the mark. I wouldn't say it fell short. It just felt like there were several lines that weren't intersecting.
Yeah, okay, I'd agree with that. That's actually a good example of where it didn't intersect as well, right? So it's not the fact, like the weird aspect that works, but did something physically happen at that door then? So there was a physical presence there that we never see
Hmm.
and never comes back again.
You can't play that away as a hallucination either, because they actually talk about that later with, oh, it was actually heating and cooling of the ship that would cause like the bulkhead to adjust or whatever. And
Yeah,
you're like, what?
I mean that looked pretty claw marky type
If
type
the
thing,
scene
right?
had ended and it was normal,
Yeah,
that would have been much better.
yeah, exactly. I think another place actually the ship did really well actually was with Peters near the end when
That that
you know
was
they
that was hands down the best part,
yeah.
like of the ship actualizing like that.
Mhm. Yeah, like you had, you know, had kid running around and the all of the doors looking like caskets. Loved that
Mm.
touch. And sure, there's totally a floor here.
Well,
Um,
they
like that's what I would have expected more if the ship is playing with them. Like that's what I would expect with the haunted house type thing, right? And if your mind's starting to go, which is a common thread in Eldritch horror, that would be how I would expect that. There were so many opportunities for stuff like that throughout this film, and it was never realized.
oh, I agree.
Like,
The well with that scene, the directing was so on point there, and same with the acting. I would say that hands down that is the best scene in the film, simply by everything occurring in it is, this is a mother who believes her son is across the room from her and she's only focused on him, and without even seeing the lack of a floor, that
yeah,
something's going to be had is something harmful is going to happen when she enters that room,
yeah,
and it's expressed in seconds when she gets to that top room before she falls.
yeah,
So that fall is not even a shock to you because you knew
yeah,
it was going to happen, and that's how every component from directing, lighting, set design, acting were perfect in that.
yeah,
It's it's unfortunate this movie wasn't a whole string of scenes like that, but
yeah,
I would definitely give my kudos to anyone involved in that scene.
yeah. You know that encapsulated the entirety of it. That scene is what I remember the movie being more like that,
Same,
right?
same.
And I it threw me off. You know, let's talk of the missed opportunities with that. Um, like I see Chekhov's guns laying all over this thing,
Mm.
right? The explosives, the meat grinder type hallway, the spiky doors, the spikes in the room where the gravity drive is, all of this. Not one of them was used. Well, sorry, the explosives were used. Not one of the other ones was used.
I did, I did like it, and I did dislike it. There was, I wish there was a little bit of foreshadowing from it. So
Mhm.
when I believe it was Justin mentioned the hallway looked like a meat grinder,
Yeah.
uh, I for sure thought that was gonna play into his death somehow, because I had
Yeah.
forgotten the resolution of his story where he gets
Yeah.
put in the cryo chamber or whatever. I think Stark finds blood on the bridge, the explosions, the spikes, even the fall
Hmm.
wasn't wasn't something that could be possibly called. And when it comes to these horror things, they'll, at least in early 2000s, late 90s horror, I know you're much more familiar, but from my
Yeah.
experiences, the way that they'll do it is they'll either uh, show you what's gonna kill them in advance,
Yeah.
and then maybe do an elaborate way of how it happens or how they
Yeah.
get in that situation, or they show you something and then they directly subvert your expectations at the very end,
Yeah.
and then uh, do it in a different way.
Yeah.
I think the only example that comes immediately to mind is one of the Final Destinations. A girl falls and she like just barely catches herself and then starts getting a nail gun through the head. And
Yeah.
it's like you didn't expect that to be the way that she went
Yeah.
because they subverted your expectations from a different death.
Yeah. And, and yeah, but it's again, it was that you knew something was going to happen at the very least. And like, because this is kind of the cusp, like, yeah, because I guess this is around the same time as Scream, and I know you did Last Summer and such too. I think those were 95, 96 ish, I want to say, offhand. So I know horror was in a weird spot around this time because, the 80s, we clearly had, you know, Friday the 13th and Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and all of these. And I think horror kind of died a bit and then got revived with Scream.
Yeah,
But
there was definitely a period there, and I wouldn't have the knowledge. Uh, but even then, I mean, Scream kind of came back satirically. I think there was an intentionally campy or very premise driven revival around that time. But I
yeah,
think nowadays horror really came back with your, and I'm not talking like the torture porn stuff.
found footage ones,
Yeah,
like
I
Paranormal Activity, that type of thing.
I'm thinking more from the Asian takes on horror, the
Mm,
Japanese and Korean horror, and their uptakes, and then uh, despite what you think, maybe House of a Thousand Corpses and those
yeah,
lines of things, more
yeah,
like how crazy can people be?
yeah,
That being said, I feel like this movie also kind of wanted to be an action movie,
yeah.
and
I can kind of see that.
there was a missing tenseness. So when you're watching a horror, even a bad horror, they'll start trying to develop a tenseness from the start, and they'll
Mm,
kind of build it slowly until events start happening. So you're
right.
kind of like on your edge of your seat. You don't know what's gonna happen. Feel a little tingle, maybe like some hairs are standing up. I didn't get anything like that until they entered the engine room.
Hmm.
And I mean, we're talking 20 minutes into the film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's kind of where, again, one of those things I kind of missed it. So you said that they started it out with them on a rescue mission at first. That would just be something to give that a little bit of tension. Um, because the engine room was the catalyst for everything, question mark. It popping up. And yeah, I just want to touch on one other thing you said there. We're talking about the Asian horror and House of Thousand Corpses, where how crazy people are. That's what Eldritch Horror should have been.
Yes, agreed.
Like like that's what we should have been seeing here. And
One with all the orgiastic horror found footage that was originally in the cut.
mhm,
Like I think that would have expressed it more because apparently there was a lot of this is how crazy people can be.
I think
Um,
like half an hour of footage was cut or something like that.
something like that.
Like
And frankly, there there must there must be something missing in this film because there's a puzzle piece that's missing. I can't see the whole picture.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Like even Weir didn't. He came off as evil,
Yeah.
not crazy. He didn't feel like the personification of the evil or of the ship. So Weir flaying and stringing up DJ
Mhm.
makes sense from this line of thinking. That's an expression of what someone can do to another person if they've totally lost it.
Yeah.
And then on the other half, Peters and the scene where she falls would also fit into that well as well.
Yeah.
It's it's a different kind of insanity that she was experiencing, I guess you could say.
Well, Justin's airlock scene as well. I think.
Mm, that would
Like,
fit it very well.
yeah, like, and I think that's what bothers me so much about it. There's so many hints of them getting it right, and I do think I I wouldn't be surprised if, yeah, that half hour that was cut, like, just read it, the little bit I've read about it is like, I want to see this. It's a shame that there's no copies of it left because the one copy they found was in a salt mine.
The I think the salt mine thing is just a urban legend
Mhm.
because they only ever released the one cut and they had cut about a film out of it, but there was nothing ever released. Either
They
way,
actually went looking for it. Like, I think I saw that Anderson
yeah,
went looking for it, and because they wanted to do basically a full cut of it, and yeah, essentially all of the footage was basically unusable because this was around the time that it was switching from VHS to DVD and everything was
yeah.
still VHS and
I That makes me so sad because I mean I still enjoyed this movie.
yeah.
Like I I had no problems with watching the film. Like I was fully in it. I didn't want to get up. I wasn't fiddling with my phone or anything. But when you start watching it critically, it just there's some large holes that just kind of falls apart.
Yeah. One thing we've definitely talked about before, there's a big difference between enjoyable and good.
Yes.
This movie was enjoyable.
Oh, for sure.
It was not good. Right, right, and that's exactly it. I never felt I honestly felt like I wanted a bit more of it. Like, it's not like I was taken out of it.
Mm.
It's just, you know, when I'm thinking about it, it's kinda like, ugh.
See,
And
here's the thing for me. I keep thinking that this movie really wanted to be an action movie too. And I think part of that might have to do with the directing
okay,
and the way things are established there. I mean, we have Paul W.S. Anderson. I mean, we're talking Mortal Kombat. We're talking
yeah,
the Resident Evils.
yeah,
If this movie was filmed more in the aspect of, if we viewed it more in the aspect of the first Resident Evil,
mhm,
I mean, it doesn't improve the movie at all, but it just makes it make more sense.
okay,
Yeah, kind of action, kind of horror, um, threading that line. But we're also looking at several years difference, right? This is definitely preceding it. You could
yeah,
definitely see, oh, the director of this definitely was involved in that project later on,
yeah,
is what I mean. And I'm wondering if it had to do with the rewrites or the recuts, because from what I understand, this movie was greenlit like 10 weeks before it went into production, which is tiny amount of time.
yeah.
Post
They
was
had
cut down from like 8 to 4 weeks, or was
I
it
think
eight to
they
six?
I think, they finished it a week before it was actually released. I
Oh,
remember that.
post production
Mm,
was reduced from 6 weeks to 4 weeks.
yeah.
Um, Multiple
They had 10 months to
rewrites.
do it.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
the test viewership that just went, no, this ain't it, and then they cut out like the half hour of footage because it was too gory, and it still ended up with like an NC-17. They should have
yeah,
just went full R.
yep.
if they just
Oh
went
yeah.
with it.
But I mean, and I think that's the product of its time again, right? Because gotta remember, this is before Saw and Hostel,
Mm.
right? And from what I understand of these scenes,
Oh,
it would
they
have
were,
been
yeah.
like, I mean, to give you an idea of it, so think the layers of hell, right? They had people being dismembered, and they did it practically by having amputees, so they could literally rip off arms. They had very sexually explicit scenes
Hmm.
that they had porn stars in so they could do it safely and authentically,
Mm.
right? Like they went all out on it. Like it's one of those things that I get why they cut it, but they really shouldn't have cut it. And I think, if the movie had come out even a few years later, they might have actually gotten away with keeping that stuff
I think,
because
well,
we would have had Saw.
I think one of the this is gonna sound so ridiculous to someone not familiar with the production of this film,
Yeah.
but this movie would have been better if Titanic had released on time.
Yep.
Because
I was thinking the same thing.
this movie was a less like in movie production terms, this movie was a last minute release because Titanic was pushed back.
Yeah.
They needed to fill that blockbuster spot, and they had to do it in a short amount of time. And I mean, this movie on full production, letting the director do what they wanted to do within, whatever constraints that need to be actually done, would have been amazing. It would
Yeah.
have turned it from that it's a bad movie, but I love to watch it to uh, this movie's awesome and I love to watch it.
Yeah.
Or I might be overly critical and go, it's a awesome movie and I don't like it. Like several other movies that will go unnamed at this time.
Yeah. Of all the films that we've watched and discussed, this one here, it definitely hit me like, even more so than like when we were discussing Silent Hill. Has me going, what could have been?
Well, I think the so if we were to compare this to Silent Hill, and I know there's like almost no similarities between them at all, but from a my own personal standpoint,
Mm.
I look back at Silent Hill and I say I really enjoyed watching that movie, and then when I rewatch it, there's little bits more, and I enjoyed it even more.
Yeah.
When I went back and I watched the movie with this Event Horizon with the same heart, I th- I might have enjoyed it less.
Yeah.
I know critically it doesn't stand up to what it could have been. Does it feel like it's just a lot of stuff on the surface, a lot of set dressing to you? Like it's just as it is, because there's a lack of consistency, it just feels visual.
Yeah. Yeah. It. That's a good way of putting it. It's a lot of set dressing. I mean, that goes back to the Chekhov's guns that I was
Mm,
talking about. It's like, okay, cool. Why do you have a meat grinder here? Why do all the doors have spikes? Why is the engine room filled with spikes? It was a visual thing. It was almost trying too hard to be a creepy environment,
agreed. And I
right?
mean,
Like,
they nailed from the design aspect. They nailed what they were going for. Like a cathedral insides with like tower spikes, what the spikes in the engine room were supposed to represent, the hallways, but it feels everything just felt thrown in.
yeah,
Like even the fact that the ship was cross shaped, or that the window in the hallucination and at the end was cross shaped. It seemed more like, yeah, set dressing, just like, oh yeah, well we'll make it about heaven and hell. Here's some symbolism.
yeah, and they had cool pieces of set dressing that I had no issues with. Right? They talk about the ship living. It's like, okay, well, you had that kind of fleshy moss throughout the ship.
Hmm.
That worked fine. It with exactly what they were going for. Or again, the casket shaped doorways when
Hmm.
when Peters was chasing her kid. It's like they didn't know where they wanted to go with it. You know what it is? So again, from what I was reading of their production notes, they they had their general overall idea, but instead of going, "This is what we want it to be," I think they really focused on the, "This is what we don't want it to be." So
Uh,
again, so and I think this even ties back to like the door where we were talking about. That would have worked fine if they still kind of had the eldritch horror monsters, even if like they don't need to be xenomorph present,
hmm.
right? But just having it there a little bit, but because they didn't want to be alien, well, we can't do that. So that entire thread gets cut. I wonder how much of that played on it because I saw a lot in the notes that I was reading, a lot of that. No, we don't want it to be this. We don't want it to be this. Instead of letting it be its own thing.
And using that as your benchmark for a film is probably would probably affect it even more than saying we do want it to be this and we do want it to be this. To avoid
Yeah.
those similarities, and there was a lot. On the visual speaking, I kept getting reminded of other movies and other shows.
Yeah.
When Peters was climbing up while chasing her hallucinated son,
Yeah.
all I was being reminded of was the corridors on Deep Space Nine.
Mm,
When they were in the Lewis and Clark, all I could think of was the Nebuchadnezzar.
yep.
And that had nothing to do with Lawrence Fishburne.
Well, and so that one there, that one's going to be a bad correlation because the Nebuchadnezzar wasn't till 99. So this came out before that.
Yeah, I know. It's
Yeah.
and
But
that's what makes makes it bad for me because it like I know that the Matrix came out after.
yeah.
There's one thing though, like after that first explosion when the engine first went off in the Event Horizon and like a bunch of stuff happened, a bunch of fires broke out. On the Lewis and Clark, how did the ladder catch on fire?
Um,
I noticed this and I know why from like a directing standpoint why they would light a ladder on fire,
yeah.
but I was just like, how? But seriously, from a design aspect, this movie did do something really good, which a lot of films kind of miss out on, and that is showing scale.
Mm,
You you get a feeling for how big the Lewis and Clark is, and using that, you're able to get a feeling for how big the Event Horizon is.
yeah.
What could have helped this movie might have even been like naming schemes, because it did seem kind of like all over the place, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Having a common theme, though predictable, for say naming vessels is kind of important in these sort of things.
Yeah.
But when it comes to scale, and this is one of the visual aspects that it did really well, just as they're exiting that storm to intersect with the Event Horizon and they stop, you already have that judgment of scale of how big the Lewis and Clark is.
Yeah.
And then it kind of pans out and it's like, this is the Event Horizon. This is actually how giant it is. And this is how cathedral esque it is.
Hmm.
That scene I loved.
I agree.
I think they did a great job visually on that. But again, at that time, I didn't have any tenseness.
Yeah.
I was just sitting there comfortably watching a movie.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like the opening of the film, I didn't have any issues with the opening of the film. Like, all right, no, I can I liked how the music was. You know, it had that kind of sci-fi and that kind of tension in the music, even though there wasn't anything going on there. You know, the mostly practical effects. Granted, that's a product of the time,
Yeah.
right? That's why the little bits of CGI stand out like a sore thumb. But I
Oh,
mean,
it's
this is still early, right? The ships were feeling functional and used. You got that immediate family of the crew working together, and knowing that even without having the scenes, right? Like it started out strong, I feel, and it's just yeah, it just went off the rails. And no,
Yeah,
off the
just
rails again. It's not quite the right term, but
yeah, it's I'm telling you, man, the lines that don't intersect,
yeah,
they they don't come to like a final point arriving at the like same of end destination.
yeah.
Unfortunately, this movie kind of going a little bit back to them developing this film around what they don't want it to be. They definitely weren't able to establish what it is at the end
Yeah.
as a whole product. Like this movie could have easily been stripped off into two movies. One is a space action movie, some people fighting on a spaceship, and an eldritch horror in space.
Yeah.
And it probably would have been better. I don't think it knew what it wanted to be.
Yeah.
Uh, in that same aspect, though, I do like how the captain ended up getting that bolt gun, and then just
Mm.
didn't get to use it.
Yep.
He didn't get like a badass moment, and I very keen on that. I don't know how Weir would have been able to get the gun, but that's just a weird nitpicky movie thing. As far as the ending result, I do like that. Who's the character? Ah, it was Cooper. I do like that it was Cooper and Stark that made it out.
Mhm.
They were the ones that didn't have that trauma. So consistency wise, that made sense.
Yeah.
I do like that they had the false wake up into the true wake up.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do that in this film, if it were to end just on Weir's face, I've been like, what the f? What is this?
Yeah.
But the fact that like they had that false wake up trope was, if they're gonna do it, that's the way it should have been done.
Yeah. I yeah, I agree. It's um
There's some weird other just weird inconsistencies because I am being a little nitpicky right now that I kind of want to mention.
yeah.
And it's not the fact that in the opening credits they said on in 2015 we'd have a moon colony. It's so Weir's a scientist. He's apparently the super smart scientist whose intelligence probably rivals my own. And he builds this ship and he has a team and they receive this like distress beacon from the event horizon.
Yeah.
And it has this random sound clip they can't decipher.
Yeah.
A random doctor on a random rescue ship can hear Latin? How does an entire team of scientists in 2047 not be able to hear Latin words?
So, interestingly enough, when I was looking at TV tropes, um, that was actually something that was brought up, and there's enough of an explanation that I could buy it. They didn't get the proper. They didn't get all of the distress call. That came from the logs. So it's possible that it was just fragments of the distress beacon, and that part wasn't heard,
Oh, yeah, okay.
right? Not necessarily explained very well because again, it's a question I saw a bunch when I was looking up for my alternate or my behind the scenes facts and such about the movie. So I don't disagree with that, but again, I think it's that it's the just those little bits that are missing in the presentation that could clear it up. You know, you go, here's a 5 second clip, play the entire 5 second clip and not have that there or something, right? Um,
Well, I mean, even the introduction of a few what would be seemingly throwaway lines into the film would have tightened it up.
yeah,
From I put my blood, sweat, and tears into this to maybe renaming of the Lewis and Clark, maybe something related to like a biblical hope.
yeah,
I would like to see that because then fundamentally when it explodes, then that hope is taken away. Like
mm,
Symbolism wise, that would have been great.
Yeah.
I don't want to be. I don't want to nit harsh on this film too much because I still really enjoy it. So I'm making it sound worse than it is.
And again, that's why I say very clearly there's a difference between enjoyable and good. We both find this movie very enjoyable.
Enjoyable.
I am not rating it highly. And as you said, I know for a fact we've got some movies that shall remain unnamed that we see the exact opposite. Right? So there's nothing wrong with being critical of it
I
and still
suppose.
going, but I enjoyed the hell out of it. And I think compared to, some Little Hours movies, I think
Smooth.
we definitely come across a lot more like we enjoy this, but we also can see its flaws. So I don't think you should worry about being too critical.
Okay. Unfortunately, the movie itself is simple.
Yeah.
So there's not much that I can really call into. There was definitely scenes that made me think it was a product of its time in filmmaking, such
Yeah.
as conversations that are moving along the plot happening while they're walking down a hallway.
Yep.
I I caught that, or they're having a conversation nowhere, or that's going to nowhere as the camera's circling the crew.
Yep.
And I'm like, if that was reshot nowadays, it would be completely different. And maybe I've been spoiled with nowadays filmmaking, but just some of the production tropes is what actually pulled me out of the film because I just turned around and I like pointed at the screen and I'm like, I know what that is.
It's funny because like I didn't know a few like I get it, right? Like the walking down the hallway. It was a trope that I don't think I ever noticed until like watching an episode of House
Yeah, I think
where he
that's where I
straight up
might have.
called it out. um, but at the same time, there were some other product of its time shots that I enjoyed, like long shots. They didn't need to cut between everything that was happening.
Mm,
So I'm just like, I think I wrote down, I was like, I kind of miss these shots just are long, like, Peter's just kind of walking back and forth, and then Justin being gone. I'm like, I like that because nowadays it would have been a her walking and then a cut to the table and her walking again and a cut to the table, right? Like,
yeah, well, yeah, the ADD cutting.
yeah,
I like to call it music video cutting.
mm,
It's a new cut every couple seconds. Same scene, 50 cuts. I Long cuts are definitely my preferred manner. Like I'd like to watch what was it 1917 where they make it feel like one long cut. It might feel excessive, but I'd like to check out that movie as well.
yeah. Well, Birdman did it well. Birdman, yeah, did it well.
I would say the things that this film did well were all visual and it did them really well. But from a cohesive standpoint, it those design aspects, the character aspects, and the genre aspects didn't intersect
Yeah,
appropriately. Like if it was like a TP like structure, it wouldn't hold because nothing is mounted correctly or braced
yeah,
properly.
yeah. This movie, right, regardless of its faults, is insanely influential in pop culture.
Oh, for sure.
Dead Space
I could see
being a
Dead Space
perfect
being a
example.
yeah direct call to it.
Yeah, right. Seeing a lot of ties to the Warhammer 40K game.
I was thinking
Position
of
that too.
yeah I was thinking about that too because the opening shot or not the opening shot when the power comes back on
Yeah,
and it starts lighting up. I had like this not a nostalgia moment, a this moment where I was like, have I seen this in some of the trailers for like the Warhammer stuff? I mean, I
mm,
haven't played them, but I've watched the trailers because they're usually at least like flashy and entertaining. And it got me thinking, it's like, Was this movie influenced by Warhammer, or was Warhammer influenced by this movie?
Yeah, I could see things like Lex having some influence. I'm not sure if Lex came out before or after.
I think like 98.
While I use the Google machine. Oh no, around the same time, 96. It looks like.
Okay, so like almost immediately before. This movie should have been either an eldritch horror on Earth, haunted house,
Yeah,
or it should have been a relatively action thriller in space.
yeah,
I feel like it tried to do both.
yeah. Oh, I agree. And again, I enjoy Anderson's movie, and I enjoy Mortal Kombat quite a lot. I enjoy the Resident Evil films.
Again,
I,
well, we're the only two people who've watched them all, so
Fair enough.
I mean I say that, but like each Resident Evil made more money than the one before it, so they actually did really well.
Yeah, but that actually means they didn't watch them all.
Oh. Oh.
I mean, Death Race. These are enjoyable movies, but as you said, most of them, Alien vs Predator. But yeah, no, you're right. That action thing, I think that hits it bang on. Most of his films tend to lean a bit more to the Oh God, he's doing the Monster Hunter movie.
And so it's what he's good at, I
Yeah,
think. Popcorn sci-fi action or like gentle horror action. I'm sure he could do a breakout thing, but he's definitely found his groove.
yeah. Again, that makes me think if they weren't so afraid of being alien, I think they would have had it.
I if they went evil aliens, like even if they used Earth iconography,
Yeah.
like say like Catholic iconography or something like that, I I probably would have enjoyed the movie more. It
Oh, that would have been amazing. Have you ever seen Biblical Angels?
no.
Yeah. Biblical angels, as they're described in the Bible, are like, or as they're described, they're not the cherubs that we think. They're like eldritch. Have you ever seen anything from Bayonetta?
Yes.
Those are angels.
Oh. Okay.
That's the alien they needed. Keep with that feeling, keep with that eldritch horror, and keep the biblical references, but it's far enough away removed that no one would have confused that with Alien.
I don't think it'd be possible to confuse it with Alien anyways. I think
Yeah,
it was a weird time
yeah.
in science fiction movie making.
And science fiction and horror, both
Yeah.
of them.
And
I,
the production didn't work for it.
yeah.
I mean if we think about this in a positive way, I'm amazed that they came out with this
Mm,
with that type of like production issues, recuts like after the that recut that they did after the test filming took a week.
yeah.
You do all of this. The fact that it came out as enjoyable as it was, I I'm amazed.
Yeah.
I as far as enjoyability goes, it would definitely be 2 eyeballs out of 2 in hand. But if I were to give a rating, give me a moment. I need a count here. Yeah, if I were to give this movie a rating, I would probably. What's the best way to phrase this? I would give this movie. I'd give this movie 4 living crew members of my original 7.
Um, yeah, I'd say it's probably 3 out of 9 layers of hell.
Okay.
Like, objectively. Again, enjoyable? Yeah, 2 eyeballs in hand.
Yep.
And again, product of its time. We both clearly have fond memories of it
Oh, I'll watch it
at the
again.
time. Yeah, and I
Um,
would watch it again.
I mean, their tagline is good, but it doesn't represent what they were showing. Infinite
Yeah,
space, infinite terror.
yeah.
Where like someone get Lawrence Fishburne a gun and let him go John Wick on
No, that's Neo.
it. All right. Well, with that, this has been the Beardy and the Beast Media Club. Join us next time for Second Wall, where we begin our experience with Season 2 of Carol Tuesday, episodes 13 to 15. The following Media Club, we'll discuss the film Requiem for a Dream. Follow us here or at any of the services listed at beardyandthebeast.com. But if you like what we do, give us a share. Later.
Later.